Testing, testing. One, two, three. Thank you for joining Backlook Cinema, the podcast. I appreciate you. Come on in, have a seat, make yourself comfortable. Sit down. Let's have a chat. Let's talk about some things. This is the 55th episode. Thank you for downloading and streaming. I really appreciate it. As a matter of fact, we all really appreciate it. The reason we started this show is to strengthen the bond between my son Zach and me Zoe. And we watched movies that I loved when I was growing up in the 70s, 80s, and the early 90s. And while Zach isn't really a part of the actual recording of the podcast, we did watch a classic movie yesterday, and I'm going to get right to that. Now, if you like this show, then please rate and review us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, podchaser.com. I'm getting all of my words googly, but it's Apple Podcast, Spotify, podchaser.com, or your favorite podcast app. And finally, please follow us on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. I'll give you those handles later on, and you can find the details in the show notes. So really excited about the movie that me and Zach got to watch. Once again, we had to be separated because he's still having his symptoms, but hopefully by next week he'll be totally over it. He's gone through the worst of it. So he said that his symptoms are much lighter now. And like last week when he was first felt the symptoms, they kind of put him down. They made him lay down, right? He had to lay down for a little bit, but he was much better when I seen him this week. So hopefully he'll be totally over it by next week, and we can actually sit and watch a movie in the same room. But for this particular movie, we had to be in separate rooms. So before I get into the movie that we watch, that you already know because you saw it on the title, I'm going to talk about some of the things that I've been up to lately. So, still watching the Book of Boba Fett, and it's still continuing to unwind its stories in pleasing ways, and I'm actually still enjoying the show. For some people, it's a lot slower than they would like. They like the bang bang action Star Wars, but I think with the series, the stories are taking a somewhat different approach, at least in the live action series. So in this small spoiler, I'm gonna put out a small spoiler for people who hadn't seen it, but I imagine that by now, by the time you listen to it, if you are into the show, that you've seen it. But in this spoiler, I will say that I was pleased to see that Danny Trejo is in the Star Wars universe. So, and it's not really a huge surprise. This episode was directed by Robert Rodriguez, and they're really good friends. So in a lot of Robert Rodriguez projects, you'll see, or you will have Danny Trejo have an appearance. And the role that he's playing is totally appropriate to the role that he usually plays. And it actually kind of fills in stuff that happens in Return of the Jedi. And you will understand a certain element in Return of the Jedi better once you watch this episode. We also get to see a nice Wookiee fight, and it's between Black Krrsantan. I don't know how to say his name. It's a bunch of R's, a K, maybe a couple of K's. But one of his names is Black because he has really dark brown or black fur. And so that was a pretty good fight. Well, it was good to see him fight, but it wasn't a great fight. Let's put it that way. It was neat. It was a neat action piece, but there were problems with it. And another small spoiler, at least in my perception, it looks like Boba Fett has hired the Power Rangers. That's right. I'm putting it out there. Boba Fett has hired the Power Rangers. So on to the other thing that I've gotten into. Started Peacemaker, and it was like James Gunn had let the dog loose. It was like, this is what it looks like when Hulkamania really runs wild. It was, if there was ever anyone that was built for a role, it's John Cena as Peacemaker, because he absolutely takes it all in. I mean, I'm sure you've seen him promoting the show, and it's full Peacemaker regalia, including helmet. And so it is like he really embodies this character. And this, I've only seen the first episode. That episode was completely wild. And he absolutely owns it. So there were a couple of surprise appearances. And also there was an actor that I mentioned last week on last episode. I can't remember his name off the top of my head, but he so impressed James Gunn that James Gunn basically brought him in to Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3. So looking forward to seeing more of the show. It is crazy on another level. As far as it's like James Gunn took his cues from The Boys and but he took it in a different direction. It's like he watched The Boys and was like, oh, we can do that now? Oh, let's see what I can do, right? So that I'm excited to see what he does with what he's doing. So I'm still watching Cowboy Bebop. I don't know if I've mentioned that in previous episodes, but I am watching the Cowboy Bebop anime, and I'm kind of doing a watch along with the guys at Not a Bomb Podcast. So they are doing for some of them, or at least for one of them, it is rewatch, and for anybody else that's watching, it's they're watching for the first time and they do commentary on it, and I find that very fascinating, the comments they had on it. For me, it'll be a first time watch. It's not a show that I had watched when it first aired, and I don't like it as much as I probably would have liked it if I watched it when I first aired. But the later episodes are very much more entertaining than the earlier episodes that I watched. So really getting into it. And if you love Cowboy Bebop, the anime, you'll definitely love the commentary on their series. So that's all I've got. Without further ado, let's get into today's movie. Yesterday, me and Zach watched it separately. I told you about that earlier. And also, before I go any further, let me apologize for putting this out on a Sunday instead of Saturday, and probably a lot of you will get it late Sunday. And that's because I got real lazy real fast. One of the things I didn't mention that I really got into playing this game called Rebel Outlaw. What's it called? I forgot the name of the game already. But I probably mentioned it earlier. So it is Rebel Galaxy Outlaw or something like that. I can't remember. Sorry. But I played that a lot yesterday. And it's just a nice, relaxing game until you get blown up. So I spent too much time playing that game yesterday, which is why you're getting the show on Sunday instead of Saturday. But never fear, I have what's the word I'm looking for? I have obligations and pressures to make sure that I get it out on time on Saturday. So now, finally, without any more ado, without any more further ado, without any more delays, let's get into the show that we had watched. And that show was Judge Dredd. We're not talking about the fine piece of cinema that came out in, I think, 2012. What we're talking about is a movie that came out in 1991, and it starred Sylvester Stallone. No, not 1991, 1995, starring Sylvester Stallone. So, what is this movie about? Based on the comic, in the distant future, the reality of climate change has come to pass. Most of the Earth is no longer habitable, and humanity is crowded into a few megacities across the globe. In Megacity 1, the most feared and respected of the street judges roam the overpopulated streets to administer instant justice. He acts as judge, jury, and executioner all in one. Judge Dredd has been accused of murder he didn't commit. He must now clear his name and face the most dangerous opponent, or his most dangerous opponent. You know, it's funny, I wrote that and I'm still messing it up. That's all right. I gave you the gist of the movie. So, Judge Dredd was released on June 30th, 1995 by Hollywood Pictures Synergy Pictures Entertainment. It grossed over $34 million in the US and Canada and $113 million worldwide on a $90 million budget. And it had middling reviews. And yeah, not great, not super great. But and I didn't realize that, but I loved this movie when it came out. And I have no actual attachment to the comic. Like, I was somewhat familiar with Judge Dredd as a comic because I had read Wizard magazine and they constantly did editorials about the comic, but I never actually read the comic and I'm not familiar with its lore. But I am familiar with like the character design and the gist of the comic. So this movie was starring Sylvester Stallone as Judge Joseph Dredd. You know Sylvester Stallone of Rocky, of Rambo 3, of Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2, and many other movies. We also have Armand Assante, someone you may not be as familiar with, as Rico. He's been in Private Benjamin, American Gangster, and Gotti, and several other projects. We also have Diane Lane as Judge Hershey. She's been in Let 'Em Go, The Cotton Club, Zack Snyder's Justice League. That is what I remember her from. I mean, I've seen her in lots of movies and TV shows, but the one thing that kept bugging me was like, I've seen her recently, and it won't let go. And that's what I remember her from, is Zack Snyder's Justice League. We also have Rob Schneider, who played Herman Fergie Ferguson. He's been on Muppets from it's my lips. My lips are getting in the way. He's been on Muppets from Space, 51st Dates, and Big Daddy. Still tongues getting in the way. As a matter of fact, if you watch now I'm losing my memory, so I'm just gonna go past that. It'll come back later. I was gonna say something about the projects that Rob Schneider has been in, but I can't remember the other actor that I was going to say. Anyways, let's move on. We have Jürgen Proch. Oh, okay. All right, this isn't a European name, and I am going to mess it up, and I profusely apologize. Jürgen, I should have practiced this before I started to pronounce it. Let me try it again. Jürgen Prochnow. Okay, that's as good as it's going to get. As Judge Griffin. He's been in Das Boot, Air Force One, and many of us know him as Dune, or in Dune as the Duke Leto, the one of the earlier movie, the first Dune movie, not the current adaptation, the original Dune adaptation, and yeah, he played Duke Leto in that. So moving on, we have Max von Sydow. He played Chief Justice Fargo, and he's been in Star Wars, The Force Awakens, The Seventh Seal, Conan the Barbarian, Flash Gordon, and many other projects. It's surprising. He's such a classically trained actor, but he's very attracted to the genre of science fiction and fantasy. You see, he's been in a lot of science fiction and fantasy films, but he's also been in a lot of serious roles, or dramatic roles, I should say. We also have, finally, Joan Chen as Dr. Ilsa Hayden. She's been in Sheep Without a Shepherd, 24 City, and The Last Emperor. The first two movies, I believe, were either Chinese or Hong Kong films. I didn't do too much of a deep dive. But she was very... she did a very good job in Judge Dredd. So this movie was directed by Danny Cannon, and he's made films such as I Know What You Did Last Summer, but mostly he's been in television, so he's directed many episodes of Gotham and Pennyworth. This movie was written by Michael DeLuca. He's also written In the Mouth of Madness and Freddy's Dead, The Final Nightmare. And this story is based on characters created by Carlos Esquerra. I'm gonna mess this one up too. It's that, in Spanish, you got to roll your R's in Spanish. So when you got two R's together, you really got to roll them. And that has always been difficult for me. Carlos Esquerra and Michael DeLuca, creators of Judge Dredd. There we go. I kind of got it out there. The music is by the incomparable Alan Silvestri. He's also written The Polar Express, Forrest Gump, Flight, and so many other movies. I believe he is responsible for your favorite themes in the Avengers franchise for Marvel. And this movie had a stellar theme. It was like, he did not disappoint. He did. Many people might say that they didn't like this movie for various reasons. And I'm going to be honest with you. This is not a technically great movie. It's not objectively speaking, this is not a good movie, but I really enjoyed it, you see. And Zachary also enjoyed it. But yeah, it was not a super like there are a lot of things in the movie that don't make sense, and they've upset a lot of comic book fans who enjoyed Judge Dredd as a comic, because there were elements in the comic that they didn't stick to in the film. And the funny thing is that as far as the setting and the set pieces and the costumes, those were all very faithful, but it's story-wise, that's kind of where they went off the rails a little bit, as being different from the comic, and that upset a lot of comic book fans. So, but you can't say that Alan Silvestri didn't do his job. He was on his job. He was on his work. He knew what the assignment was, and he delivered a fantastic thing for this movie. So that is it for the rundown. And if you're enjoying the show, remember that you can get t-shirts, hoodies, mugs, face masks, jerseys. They got backpacks. They got shot glasses, and all that. You can find it all at the website, backlickcinema.com, where you can click the link to either Teespring or tpublic.com. And now we're going to take a short news break. All right, so this is our news break segment, and I am going to go over some of the stuff I heard throughout the week. So I'm sure you've heard by now the passing of the comedy great Bob Saget on January 9th. And that was really sad, because I grew up on Full House and America's Funniest Home Videos. And there are so many legends in American culture so close together that have passed, that it really gets you to thinking about your own mortality. And this is like a piece of my childhood. It's like a piece of my childhood just withering away and dying off, and just reminding me that I'm getting older and older, and I'm starting to experience the old man things that are physically and mentally. But he was a nice guy, as far as everyone who has known him has said. He's like extremely nice. And if you're familiar with his comedy, it's completely different than the character that he's played on television. Just shocking, to say the least. What a potty mouth he has, if you're not familiar with his stand-up specials. But really, he was a very entertaining man, and he was apparently a great friend to have. So, moving on, like the new show Star Trek Picard, EpicStream.com is reporting a rumor that the Bisman Bulletin, that The Mandalorian Season 3 has been put on hold due to the surge in COVID Omicron cases. Unlike the Picard show, no one on the set of The Mandalorian has tested positive, and pausing production is more of a precautionary measure. In the meantime, it seems that Star Trek Picard Season 2 has resumed production. Now, on to the next item. One of my favorite shows is Blackish, and it's one of the funniest sitcoms that I have ever watched. And Entertainment Weekly is reporting that on its 8th and final season, that show will have on a number of celebrity guest stars, including Simone I'm messing up already. Simone Biles, Babyface, Magic Johnson, Daveed Diggs, who appeared on the show before as Rainbow's brother, Vivica A. Fox, Andrew King Bachelor, Stephen A. Smith, Reed Scott, and current NBA players Dwight Howard, Kent Bazemore, DeAndre Jordan, Malik Monk, Kendrick Nunn, and I'm actually an entire season behind, but I'll see them when I see them. They're all on my DVR, just waiting for me to consume them. And then you notice some of the pauses when I was trying to pronounce these names, because I should have practiced these names before I just got on the mic. But, I didn't think about that. I didn't think about, hey, these names, they look easy. I could say it in my head, but then when it came to my lips, I was like, oh, this is problematic. So anyway, on to the final item that on the stuff I heard this week. Denzel Washington is preparing for The Equalizer 3, with Antoine Fuqua expected to direct, according to an interview conducted by Collider's Steve Weintraub when Denzel Washington was promoting his film, The Tragedy of Macbeth. So this is straight from Denzel Washington himself. He is saying that he is planning on making a third The Equalizer sequel. Now The Equalizer, the first one I really liked. The second one didn't really like as much. Hopefully the third one is going to be is going to blow us all out of the water. We'll see. I will watch it regardless. And so that is it for the stuff I heard, our news segment. We're back once again. Thanks for joining us. As a reminder, you can keep up with us by following our socials on Instagram and Facebook at Backlook Cinema Podcast, and on Twitter at Backlook Cinema. And on Instagram and Facebook, it's at Backlook Cinema Podcast, and on Twitter, it's at Backlook Cinema. And we encourage you to leave feedback, comment, suggestions, or you can email us at fanmail@backlookcinema.com. So now is the time where we get to talk about our favorite parts. So some of my favorite parts are actually the problems with the plot and the story. Zachary basically liked the film overall, and as well as I did. And I'm really glad that he enjoyed the movie. I was a little bit worried about it because it didn't age exactly well, as far as especially the massive plot holes that they had in it. But still, it was a movie that I would consider so bad it's good. It's a popcorn movie. You just sit down, and if you tune your brain down just a little bit, you get so much enjoyment out of it if you don't overthink it too much. So let's see what I have. I actually took notes this time, but it's like I'm scribbling notes in the dark. So let's see if I can interpret these things. So one of the things that I did not remember when I watched this film is that it's actually opened by James Earl Jones. Oh, sorry, I hit my bike. You might have caught that on mic. But anyways, there's an opening crawl, and it's read by James Earl Jones, and he sounds fantastic. And I forgot that he was part of this movie. And there's other things that I noticed is that in the city, I'm sure I missed a lot, but this is one I actually noticed. In the city, there's a store called Geiger's Bazaar, and I believe that is in honor or tribute to H.R. Geiger, and that is the man who designed the famous alien, or what do they call it? I forgot. The alien creature from Aliens. I forgot the official name of the thing. And one of the things that's kind of funny about this film is that they tried to create a saying that did not catch on. And you'll notice that it is said throughout the movie, and people mock the saying in the movie. And that saying is, I knew you'd say that. This is something that Judge Dredd says as kind of a punchline or something. It's supposed to be something like, I'll be back, or yippee-ki-yay. He's trying to create that moment, but it doesn't really work because they're trying really hard because you say it because it's said multiple times throughout the movie. And I think that the reason it doesn't work is because it's not that funny, and it's nothing shocking that happens after he says it. Like when the Terminator says, I'll be back, it sounds innocuous. He's at the store. He's at some place. He wants to get in, and the guy refuses him, and for some reason. And so the Terminator says, I'll be back. He walks out, and then he rams into the building with a truck, right? So it wasn't innocuous at all. Or when John McClane says yippee-ki-yay, he only says it once, and then when he says it, it's something shocking happens afterwards, or there's a callback to it, like in the original Die Hard. He says it while he's talking to the bad guy on the radio. It's kind of a throwaway line. There's like the guy asks him, "What do you think? You're some kind of cowboy?" And John McClane comes back with yippee-ki-yay. And then at the end of the movie, the bad guy mocks him, saying the line again, yippee-ki-yay. And then McClane whips out this semi-automatic gun, or maybe it's a full automatic gun that's taped to his back, and he uses the blaster with the bad guys. So that's how these taglines work. And it didn't work in Judge Dredd. You can't. It's very hard to purposely make that a thing unless it is a very funny joke. But there was no real joke attached to it, so it kind of, you can see they were really forcing it. And I love that attempt. I love that they tried to attempt to make "I knew you'd say that" into a thing, and failed miserably. So story-wise, as I read earlier, that the main story is that the most feared cop in Mega City 1 is Judge Dredd. Everybody reacts to him because they know him by reputation. And he is accused of murder, and he goes about trying to clear his name. So unlike the regular citizens of Mega City 1, the judges actually do have a trial and do get to defend themselves. The street judges goes out and they dispense justice. They make accusations. They charge you with a crime, and then they sentence you. You don't actually get a chance to defend yourself. It's like they're forcing you to act as your own lawyer. So I guess in the future, they got rid of lawyers and most civil rights. Like, you don't have the right to remain silent. Your court is right then and there. You don't get proper representation. What I do like about the overall story of Judge Dredd and what's emphasized in this movie is that basically the judges are cops. Imagine if the police officers actually knew the law. Fun fact, police in the United States are not required to actually know the law that they're supposed to enforce. I think there's a court case somewhere that had decided this, and this is why there are lots of false arrests and whatnot. It's because police officers don't actually know the law that well. They might know a particular slice, like a traffic police officer, and knows something about the traffic laws, but he doesn't know all of the traffic laws. He's not thoroughly versed in it. It's like, you got to remember that a police officer's training is only like 2 or 3 months in the United States, and I suspect they get continuous training throughout their hire. But in other countries, it could be up to 16 months or longer to be a police officer, because they need to thoroughly know the laws. In the fiction that is this movie, Judge Dredd, the police know the law. They can cite all the criminal codes. They carry the book of laws in a Bible-like book that they carry on their person. So they're required to know it in order to dispense justice. Now, unfortunately, they do it in a very bad way by not allowing the accused to have proper representation. But at the very least, they know it, and they can recite whatever codes that they are judging you on. So that's made abundantly clear in the movie. Another thing that I really liked is I'm going to actually say I enjoyed Sylvester Stallone's acting in this movie. He gets a lot of flack for his acting in many of the films that he's been in, but I thought that you're going to laugh at me when I say this, but I thought that he brought some real emotional depth to this movie, and I could see that he drew a lot of some of his higher angry emotions from Rambo, like when he's shooting and killing and whatnot. You can see that he's kind of grabbing from Rambo in that. But then there are some moments where you could see that he is drawing from a deep well, and it looked really good on him for doing that. I also liked all the other characters. The overall story, is problematic. If they had went in a different direction with the story, this probably would have been a better movie. But the story they chose was full of, as I said earlier, really bad contradictions. So the main plot of the story is that he gets accused. He's standing trial. The judge that is his partner, he has chosen as the judge to defend him in this tribunal, and they present evidence. One of the things that Zachary liked is the way that they had found the evidence that Judge Dredd committed this murder. So they have a special handgun called the Lawmaster 2. And when the Lawmaster 2 fires a round, the weapon encodes the rounds with the firer's DNA. And so when they find the bullet and whoever was killed, they know exactly who shot the weapon because the DNA is encoded on the bullet. So this is how he is convicted. It's like there's no way somebody else could have his DNA. So it must be him that done it. So he is sent off to prison, and on his way to prison, the aircraft is shot down, and there is a family of the city of Mega City 1 is located on the eastern seaboard, right around where New York and New Jersey and Philadelphia are located. And it's all one big, gigantic city. So they fly him from Mega City 1 to Aspen, where he's supposed to go to prison. And because of weather conditions, the aircraft has to fly it's flying very low. I think they said 60 feet, which is practically skimming the road. So while they're flying low over the cursed earth, because it's like mostly desert, there are still people that kind of live out there, even though I said earlier it's uninhabitable, meaning that it's for most people, they can't inhabit out there. But there are some people who have found a way, especially people who are mutated. And so a family of these mutants, they shoot down this aircraft and they go. And for some reason, they only grab Judge Dredd and some perp that he had put away when he when he had judged this perp earlier in the movie. In the opening scene, there was a fight, and the judge had murdered everybody except for this one perp. Well, actually, he executed them because he's a judge. So he executed all of these perps except for this one dude. The dude tried to plead not guilty. The judge sentenced him anyway. And so now they're on the same prison transport, and only they get taken, which is kind of weird. I would think that they would take everybody that was on a prison transport, since as it came out they were cannibals. So wouldn't you get everybody instead of, I don't know, maybe they were just the first two and they were going to come and get the others later, because I guess that's certainly a possibility. Maybe they were only two. They didn't know that the person that they grabbed was Judge Dredd. They just grabbed two random people, and because they were sitting beside each other, that's who ends up getting captured. So they're captured by this family, and they start to effect an escape. And then as they're escaping, the people who are called hunters, that basically they're like prison guards. They hunt down escaped prisoners, and they basically execute escaped prisoners. There's no recapturing escaped prisoners. They execute escaped prisoners on sight. And so they see the two prisoners trying to escape. So they try to kill Judge Dredd and Fergie. Fergie is the perp. And so Judge Dredd, he finds weapons, he fires back, and he kills these hunters. Now, Judge Dredd is supposed to be an innocent man, and he's firing on these law enforcement officers, and he kills all of them, right? Except for one who gets away, and he is killed by somebody else. But that is, and then like when he gets back to Mega City 1 to try find the real killer, because he finds out who the real killer is, He goes back to find the real killer, and he's still fighting other judges and police officials, and he's killing a lot of them. So it's like, wow, this is a huge thing. And then at the end of the movie, he's able to prove his innocent, and they give him his badge and shield back. And well, I said badge and shield, they're the same thing. They give him his shield, his armor, his helmet. They basically make him a judge again and send him on his way. And that's pretty wild. It's like, did you not see him murder all of these other judges and law enforcement officials? You had to seen all that, right? I mean, you're not going to have like an inquiry about that. You're just going to let him go. So that was pretty wild. He didn't murder this reporter that he was accused of killing, but he did in fact kill all these other people, and they're just going to let him go. So that, I thought that's most of the movie, right? So that's a significant portion. And when I first watched it, I didn't even think of it. It's like, of course he's going to shoot back. He's defending himself. But when you think too deep in it, it was like, oh my God, he's murdering other judges. That's not right. But I guess you can't really, like I said, you can't think too deep in it, or you get caught. It's like a time travel movie. If you think too hard about a time travel movie, you're going to come up into logic problems that you cannot solve, and the movie is going to stop making sense. So don't do it. Don't do it to yourself. Sit back, relax, kind of tune your brain down, and enjoy the movie. So and speaking of tune your brain down, one of my favorite moments, I referred to a fight that Dredd had when he first got captured by these mutants, so people living out on the cursed earth, and capturing people in order to feed off of them. One of the funny moments, like when they were first captured and they were hanging by their arms, and Fergie is playing by Rob Schneider. Back when I thought he was funny, and he's actually still sort of funny in this movie, but not very funny. It's like not haha laugh out loud like I used to laugh at him. So anyways, as Fergie is, he doesn't know these people. He doesn't know why they're captured. And these people are very religious. They're talking about like there's a matriarch and his 3 sons, and 2 of the sons look sort of kind of normal. And the 3rd son it's like he's got a lot of mechanical prosthetics. So he's basically a cyborg. He's a giant cyborg. He has a knob on his head to basically it's literally an attitude adjuster. So, they are religious fanatics. They praise the Lord for bringing bounty to them. They praise the Lord that one of the people they managed to capture was the great Judge Dredd himself. So Fergie understands this, and he starts to praise the Lord too. He's like, "Oh yeah, brother, I'm a believer." And so they let him down. The family let him down, and they start praising the Lord and everything. And Dredd tries to warn him what he's doing is a mistake. Like, don't try to join them. You don't know what you're doing. And Fergie is like, well, I'm down here and you're up there, so I guess my plan is working. And then Dredd goes, they're cannibals, right? So they brought him down so that they could eat him first. And then they show a shot of some dude that they had captured earlier that they had cooked on a spit. So that was a funny part. That was really enjoyable. And then when Dredd gets loose, they start fighting, and during the fight, I mentioned the cyborg with the big knob on his head. So it looks like a stereo knob from an old stereo system. So on a medium setting, that he gets I guess he gets more agitated. He's more easily agitated. So the more you turn the knob, the more easily agitated that this cyborg dude gets. So during the fight, instead of punching or hitting this dude, Dredd turns the knob all the way down, and that essentially puts him to sleep. So that was a funny part of that fight. And so, as I said, Dredd learns about basically that Dredd wasn't a natural born person. Dredd was a test tube baby, and he was part of an experiment to create the perfect judge. And out of this experiment came himself and another test tube baby called Rico. And Rico was in a very problematic prison scene at the beginning of the film. So let's go back to the beginning. So Rico is held in solitary confinement in this cell that is wrapped around a force field. Outside the cell are intelligent miniguns. Like, it's not exactly AI, but they recognize voices. And they're apparently trained on anybody who tries to visit this particular prisoner. And presumably they could shoot the prisoner too, should the prisoner try to escape. Or at least you would think that that's how they're designed, because there are a lot of guns in this room. The giant cannons. It's like unnecessarily large guns for one person who might need to be executed in the event that they try to escape. So whatever, I guess the procedure is, the warden taps a code to let him into this vast room, because the force field is only a tiny part of the room. Most of the room is taken up by these giant guns. So he goes into this large room where the prisoner is held, and the guns ask him for identification. The warden gives the guns his identification, and the guns disarm. They basically point their barrels down, and then the warden goes and he talks to the prisoner. Apparently they have a contentious relationship, I guess. I don't know. It's a weird relationship. And apparently they have a plan together, but I'm not sure. It's not clear what the prisoner has with the warden, whatever that plan is. But whatever the warden thought the plan was, he was not a part of it, because he gives Rico, the prisoner, a box. And then Rico quickly turns the box into a gun and shoots the warden in the throat. Now, it's easy to see why he did this. He shot the warden in the throat because that is how the warden gave commands to the guns. So he tried to say something to the guns, but the guns don't understand his voice because his voice box is tore open. And the warden is dying anyway. He's like, left alone, he would bleed out. But because the guns don't recognize his voice, they shoot him to death. So it's weird because they never make any attempt to shoot the actual prisoner. It's like as soon as they shoot the warden, they figure their job is done, and I guess they disarm. I don't know. You would think that the guns that can aim on their own would have cameras, so why didn't they shoot the other prisoner? What did they think the other prisoner was? Don't they recognize faces? It's weird. It's the future. You would think that guns that are autonomous would have some type of facial recognition, and I don't think that is the case. And then the guards know there's something wrong. They go into the room. They are able to disarm the guns. But then Rico, because there's a bridge involved in this cell, he's able to climb under the bridge and kill the prison guards from behind and facilitate his escape. It's kind of a messed up moment, because you have these semi-autonomous guns, or probably fully autonomous guns with, I'm thinking, artificial intelligence, and yet they, for some reason, don't recognize that the prisoner himself, that the very thing that these guns are supposed to shoot, they totally ignore, and that is a weakness in the story. Like I say, you got to turn your brain off if you don't want it. It's funny because when I first watched it, did not trigger anything, but as I watched it again, it's like, oh yeah, that doesn't make any sense. Still had fun. So going on from there, Dredd finding out how his DNA got on the murder weapon is because Rico and Dredd were made from the same strand of DNA. They're basically identical. They don't look alike, but their DNA is identical. So that's why Dre's because nobody else can pick up this lawgiver 2. The lawgiver 2 can only be held by a judge. And so the only way, presumably, that somebody could be murdered with a judge's weapon is if they themselves are a judge. And Rico was once a judge. And that's why he was able to, what happened was he found a uniform that he could alter to make it look like that it was Judge Dredd. He goes into this apartment that apparently apartments all have internal surveillance, and murders this journalist, making sure that everybody could see that it was Judge Dredd that does this. and then plus the DNA and everything. So that's part of the plan. The whole plan that Rico has been able to actually, I think this plan was like, I guess, decades in the making, because Rico's been in jail for a number of years, put away by Judge Dredd himself, because Rico was a judge, but then he exhibited more and more psychotic behavior, and so he had to be taken away. So he's presumably executed, but he wasn't executed. He was just held. And then he was basically set free by a new Chief Justice, the original Chief Justice having gone on what is called the Long Walk. So the new Chief Justice wants to create chaos in Mega City 1. And if there's chaos in the city, then the council will turn to any solution to get the city under control. And the new Chief Judge is called Chief Judge Griffin. What Chief Judge Griffin wants to do is create a brand new judge force, a force of street judges that are entirely made of clones that he can control. Now, why he needs to do this is never actually explained, but he wants to create an army of clone judges under his command instead of the regular human judges. And he wants to get Rico to help him fulfill this thing or this plan. And that's why he breaks Rico out of jail. And I kind of like that aspect of the movie. I like that part of the story, the somewhat complexity of it. And then Rico has his own plan. The original judges were supposed to be made of the best judges in history, or in the history of the Mega City 1. But Rico destroys all of those samples and has the lab take his DNA sample to use for all of the judges. So now all of the new judges would be flawed like Rico, and that could be problematic. And then in come Judge Dredd to disrupt Rico and all of the havoc that he is trying to impose on Mega City 1. So I think what I really like about it are all the action sequences. That's what I take away. It's not so much story, because like I've said a bunch of times, the story is not going to make a bunch of sense. But what I really take away are the action sequences, the costume, the little bit of humor that they have, and it all really kind of works together for me. So it was that is what I take away from this movie. When I tell people I enjoyed it, that is what I'm talking about. The action is great, and the costumes and the uniforms, the set pieces, the futuristic cars, all of these work extremely well. Like, one of the best designed vehicles is the motorcycle that the judges ride, and it's just a nice looking vehicle that they basically built from the prop masters sort of built from the ground up. And I talk about more of that in the trivia. Or the costumes, especially the street judge's costume, how they did something different from the comics, is that they kind of use a costume to designate like judge ranks. So there are senior judges and there are like junior judges, and how they did that with the costume. The costume was very authentic to the source material. So on one shoulder they have this gigantic I guess is copper eagle, and the other shoulder they have something that looks like scales, and then they have the giant badges that the judge wear and a chain that connects the eagle to the badge, and they've got these giant knee pads. It's the colors are slightly off, but it's all nice to see that they were adhered so close to the comic, and it's very enjoyable to see that. So yeah, those are a lot of my favorite parts in Judge Dredd, and I could probably talk for another 20 minutes, but I'm gonna shut that down right here, and I want to move over to the trivia segment. So and then I'll probably reminisce about some of my favorite things in the movie when I get while I'm doing the trivia. So the trivia is brought to us by IMDb, where we get almost all of our trivia. So let's get this started. Director Danny Cannon was so disheartened over his constant creative disputes with Sylvester Stallone that he swore he would never work again with another self-absorbed actor. He also claimed that the final version was completely different from the script due to the changes that Stallone demanded. Also, it should be said that Danny Cannon didn't direct many films after this one. It was this one, and I think the movie I Still Know What You Did Last Summer. And then pretty much after those two movies, he went back to television and has been directing television ever since. Next, in later interviews, Sylvester Stallone said he felt that the film was supposed to be a comedy/action film and demanded rewrites to make it even more comedic. The director and screenwriter, however, had intended a darker, more satirical approach, which led to many difficulties behind the scenes. And it's interesting because the next adaptation that came out years later was much more, I think, what the director and the screenwriters were shooting for in the movie Judge Dredd. So in the movie Dredd, it's exactly that. It's dark and it's satirical. It's saying something about society, I guess, law enforcement and society, drug enforcement, these types of things. I hadn't seen Dredd in a long time, but I'm looking for, I want to watch it again just so I could compare it to Judge Dredd. But and I would have appreciated a darker, more satirical movie than the movie that we got. And I am going to, later on in this trivia, you'll see why. Now, the moment where Dredd takes off his helmet caused a lot of controversy. Judge Dredd would never remove his helmet in the comics. He took it off only once in the comics, but his disfigured face was covered with a censor bar. Producers obviously would not allow an expensive performer such as Sylvester Stallone to never show his face clearly. Next item. The scene in which Fergie mocks Dredd was improvised, and it turned out to be so funny to see Rob Schneider making fun of Sylvester Stallone that it was kept in the movie. And yeah, that was a very funny moment. I think that's when they're sitting in the seat, and they're sitting in the transport, and the thing that Judge Dredd says all the time is, "I am the law. I am the law." Especially when you think about how Sylvester Stallone says it, "I am the law." So that is what Fergie says, played by Rob Schneider. He mocks that accent in the prison transport, and that was funny. Now, to bring Hammerstein to life, they were going to use a man in a suit, but Danny Cannon insisted they build it for real. It's powered by hydraulics and controlled by 5 remote operators. Now, the Hammerstein refers to a robot that Rico gets from, where he steals it from the pawn shop after he murders the shopkeeper. So he murders the shopkeeper. The Hammersteins are supposed to be illegal to own, but the shopkeeper says that you can own it and keep it as a collector's item as long as they're deactivated. But after Rico kills the shopkeeper, he goes over to Hammerstein. He opens up the panel to access his wires, and he basically just twist some wires together and a Hammerstein comes to life. And so the director, Danny Cannon, wanted to make a real-ish, I don't want to say for real, but a real-ish robot instead of having a person in a suit. And it looks really good on film. They did an excellent job on this particular creature effect. Now, at first, the villain for this movie was going to be Judge Death, a monster who makes living illegal. But it was too expensive to create Death's skeleton body, and Rico had more to do with Dredd's past. And what's interesting is that in today's technology, they can do exactly that. And that would be fascinating. Unfortunately, in the sequel, not the sequel, but the later adaptation of Judge Dredd was not well received. It was a very good story. It was much better than Judge Dredd. But the problem is that people didn't go see it. People didn't see it in the theaters. And so I don't think there are any plans on doing really any more theatrical Judge Dredd projects. I've seen a bunch of things on IMDb saying that they're going to be doing a television series, and there are apparently a couple of web movies that had come out over the years, but I've never seen those, and they're very hard to get a hold of. I guess it's a movie that's on somebody's hard drive. So moving on. In an interview, Rob Schneider claimed that the film crew gave Sylvester Stallone extra fire retardant on the back of his costume for the fiery exhaust shaft scene, while Mr. Schneider got no fire retardant at all. So there's a scene where they're running through this it's an exhaust fight that spews out flames. It's supposed to be like every 20 seconds. So this is the only way that they can get into the city. So they run through the shaft and there's flame shooting. They're trying to outrun the flame that's coming. And they figure out how to escape it, but I guess Sylvester Stallone was like very expensive, so they made sure that he was protected. But unfortunately, they did not make sure that Snyder was protected, and that's kind of messed up. So continuing, Danny Cannon was apparently not allowed on the set for the post-production reshoots. That's a grave insult. The next item. John Wagner, the creator of the comic character on which the film was based, said when interviewed by Empire in 2012, the story had nothing to do with Judge Dredd, and Judge Dredd wasn't really Judge Dredd, even though Stallone was perfect for the part. He did, however, praise the production value and budget of the film. In an interview with Total Film, he said that the film had tried to do too much and told the wrong story. And I agree with him. And remember, this is the screenwriter. So yeah, I think that is correct. All of what he said, I believe is correct. Next, the Lawmaster bikes were built from scratch. They were so powerful, only stuntmen could drive them. The actors were given safer, low-powered moped versions to ride. Yeah, and it looked great. The bikes looked great, but it's funny that they were made so powerful. Now, this is, I'm going into a subject I talked about earlier. So RoboCop from 1987 borrowed so much from the Judge Dredd comics that it delayed this production for years. It was so successful and similar that producers had to wait before going ahead with this movie. And I think this is what they meant by the director had wanted to make it darker and more satirical. RoboCop is perfect in that area. It is exactly what they wanted to do with Judge Dredd, but it's not a direction that Sylvester Stallone wanted to go. They ought to just say that he produced the film because he had so much creative control over Judge Dredd. Yeah, and RoboCop is a near perfect movie. It was, and you can see the parallels when you think about it. You can see the parallels of RoboCop and Judge Dredd. So next, from the beginning, the film was intended to receive a PG-13 rating. Due to excessive violence, the MPAA refused to downgrade the initial R rating, despite repeated appeals by the studio and Sylvester Stallone, mostly because of the schedule constraints. The film could not be recut and was released with an R rating. It's back then. It's R rated for back then. But nowadays, because there's hardly any blood or any gory scenes, I think today it would be PG-13. Or even back then, I think the MPAA I think they misjudged the film. So, Danny Cannon turned down the chance to direct Die Hard with a Vengeance from 1995 in order to make this film. So it's kind of too bad for him, but also glad that he didn't do it, because Die Hard with a Vengeance, it was a great movie, and I can't imagine somebody else directing it. So next, Rob Schneider got banged up while shooting. On his first day, he fell down a flight of stairs. That's not good for anybody. Up next, in the comics, Fergie is a fugitive who lives in the Undercity, the remains of the original Eastern Seaboard U.S. cities, which were covered with a layer of concrete, and Mega City 1 was built on top. This was the top dog over the outcasts and mutants. In the film, he is simply a cowardly ex-convict who serves as a comic relief. And it's really a shame that that this is what they decided to do with that particular character. Now, in Mega City 1, in the film, Mega City 1 is shown to be much smaller than it is in the comics. In the first scene featuring the Council of Judges, a map of North America is shown, and Mega City 1 doesn't spread out much further down from the current New York metropolitan area. New York, New Jersey, and Connecticut. Maps from the comics show Mega City 1 covering most, if not whole, of the U.S. Eastern Seaboard. It is also stated that in this scene that it has a population of 65 million. In the comics, it is usually around 400 million, although it varies. This is after the Apocalypse War has goodness gracious. This is after the Apocalypse War has halved their population from 800 million. Goodness gracious. Okay, moving on. The Coen brothers were offered a chance to make the film. They turned it down in favor of Fargo from 1996. Coincidentally, Max von Sydow's character is named Fargo. All right, so that's it for the trivia. I hope you enjoyed that little tidbit. Hopefully you got some information about the film if you're a fan of the film that you didn't know before. And now I've told you what me and Zachary thought about the film. Let's see what the critics think. So, Rotten Tomatoes, critics gave it a 22%, and the audience gave it a 30%, and on IMDb reviews, it got a 5.6 out of 10. So, I guess it's unique. I got the hiccups, and I'm going to have the hiccups for the rest of this podcast, apparently, but I get to the critics think, and then after that, I'm going to thank you for joining me, and hopefully, I will finish with the hiccups before I finish with the show. So anyway, so let's see what the critics that I found on Rotten Tomatoes thought on Judge Dredd. See, I guess it's uniquely me that I liked this movie, but I'm part of the 30% who enjoyed this film. So Karen James from the New York Times wrote, "Although it's full of noise and fake firepower, Dredd simply lies there on the screen until the final scenes." And that is, no, I don't agree with this at all. I know there are problems with the story, but what she is writing is not it. Next up is James Rolke from Netflix. I didn't even know that Netflix had reviewers. So he wrote, "A fairly loud, pointless exercise in future cop heroics with Sylvester Stallone as a one-man cop, jury, and judge who gets set up in order to, you can't figure it out." No, you can't figure it out, James. I knew exactly what was going on. He was set up so that he can take the fall for to help people lose confidence in judges, and to put him away so that he doesn't interfere with what Judge, I forgot his name, what the Chief Justice was trying to do. He's trying to create chaos so he could put his own unit of clone judges on the street. I knew what he was doing. Anyway, moving on to Mark Savloff. He writes for the Austin Chronicle and wrote, all All in all, a better than average adaptation of a way above average comic. Better than average. It's very generous. I'm going to say that is very generous because, as I've said earlier, objectively, this is not a good movie, but I enjoyed it for how bad it is. And finally, we have Eddie Harrison from filmauthority.com, or I should say film-authority.com. He wrote, with a great aerial chase scene, lots of cool guns and gadgets, and a 30s serial mood, this Judge Dredd is above the law when it comes to mindless fun. Yes, Eddie Harrison gets it. He gets my mindset about this movie. The key words, mindless fun. You can't think about it too hard. You will have a stroke. So finally, look, no more hiccups. And I feel good about that. Finally, Judge Dredd is, as of this recording, available on Amazon Video for Prime subscribers. Next week, we'll be talking about The Last Action Hero with special guest Archie Atkinson, co-host of the Real Belief podcast. I had taken a listen to Real Belief podcast, and that is a very intriguing show. It basically looks at movies from a religious perspective. If you have not had a chance, go check that out. It's Real Belief, REEL, Real Belief podcast, wherever you listen to podcasts. So one last time, if you like this show, then please help us grow. To do this, you can rate us, or you can write a review on Spotify, podchaser.com, or Apple Podcasts, or your favorite podcast app. You can also share our show with someone. We would greatly appreciate that. We can't get this show. Basically, we want to grow this show as much as possible. Don't forget that you can contact us at fanmail@backlookcinema.com. Believe me, it matters. Be safe. Share a movie with your family. Hug your loved ones and be outstanding.